Shi Davidi, senior columnist for Sportsnet. He joins me now. What's up, brother? How are we doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, actually, you're around this team a ton. Can you speak to how respected, revered, valued, liked Danny Jansen was?
Yeah, look, I think we've been hearing it all weekend. It's very significant, not just in the clubhouse, but throughout all levels of the organization. It was like an outpouring of people from everywhere around the team on Saturday after the trade, trying to come by and just say goodbye to him and tell him how much he appreciated him. Yesterday, unsolicited, I had a couple people come up to me and tell me how much they missed him or were upset by this. One person said to him he was my favorite. To some degree, it can be a little bit demoralizing as well when you lose somebody who is such a significant part of the organization. I think a lot of people sort of understood this was a possibility, and especially if the season went the way that this one has gone. But understanding something is possible or knowing that something's going to happen then versus when it actually happens are two different things. And so it definitely hit a lot of people really hard, deservedly so, because Danny Jansen made a major impact on this team. But it is really the grim reality of where this team is right now.
Yeah. I can only speak from my perspective with Danny Jansen, and I've interviewed him a few times. Every single time he's been candid. I've enjoyed speaking with him, and I can't say that about all athletes I interview, especially when it's just over the phone. You're not doing a face-to-face, and it can be difficult for them too, right? But this guy was just an enjoyable person to speak with. And then the other thing I have is whenever I would get on like a lot of pitchers during the offseason, right? And, getting ready for spring, and especially when you get to talk to the guys that are coming in as free agents. Like I remember when Ross Stripling came. And normally when I would ask the question of who they've connected with and who they've started to, hang out with, Danny Jansen was like routinely the most common answer of this is the guy that reached out. This is the guy I'm hanging out with. This is the guy I enjoy. So, yeah, I think that there is going to be a pretty big impact on losing him. And here's the other part of it. Why do you think the Jays, if they do want to compete in 2025, given what the catching market is and what they have internally, especially when it comes to the farm system, they've raided Buffalo and they don't have any type of catching prospect that's coming up. Again, the price of the deal looks to be fine. They got a guy who was a second-round pick, I think, a year ago, and a pitcher who I read did very well in Boston's farm system in terms of just kind of like being a riser over the course of the last season. So the price is fine. It does seem to be a seller's market, but why not try to retain someone when you're that weak at that position? He means that much to your organization, and there's limited options moving forward.
Well, I mean, the sides did talk about an extension during the offseason at some point, and obviously they didn't get there. And so if you're the Blue Jays, you have to make sure that the asset doesn't go to zero, right? And that's what has happened with a lot of assets in the organization in recent years. Guys walk away, you don't get anything for them. Obviously Matt Chapman turned into a compensatory pick this year. That was important, but others have left, and you just can't afford to do that at this point in time with where the team is. And so it's different if you've got a real shot at the postseason and have a chance to make the playoffs, or you do make the playoffs, versus to let him essentially hit the market without getting any sort of return, no guarantee to extend him after this kind of season. I mean, that would be malpractice. And so there was some interest. You also saw the Texas Rangers acquire Carson Kelly yesterday. I imagine that Texas was in the mix in some degree for Danny Jansen as well. And so the Blue Jays had a bit of a market, and they got a couple of interesting guys. I do think Cutter Coffee is the primary focus for them in that deal. It's a 20-year-old with 14 homers in 61 games in high A, a level where he's 2.5 years below the average age. So that's a pretty good sign there. And when you're in the situation where the Blue Jays are in, you have to accumulate assets right now. You have to, just because the farm system has been so barren and so stripped down.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's just hard to, when they're doing the two sides of their mouth thing, going, yeah, we need to get prospects back. And every one of us is saying, we agree. But then they're going, well, we want to compete in 2025. And then I'm like, okay, well, Danny Jansen probably helps with that. And yeah, you can maybe replace relief pitchers or find ways to get those guys back. You're probably not bringing in Yusei Kikuchi again. But yeah, Danny Jansen is your homegrown guy. It didn't seem like you. I know you just said that they spoke about a contract, but when I had Janson on, I think it was August, he made it pretty clear that, or it was August, no, it wasn't August. I can't remember when it was, but he made it pretty clear to me that the contract extension talks hadn't been very meaningful with the Jays, which I found was kind of surprising that he was open about it. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like that one was a weird dividing line between the two. Okay, so how aggressive do you see them getting? Because, yeah, it does seem like they're sticking with this. We're only dealing the rental strategy outside of what, maybe Chad Green?
Yeah, well, I think they're listening on other people, right? But the Chad Green market, to me, is super interesting, or the possibility. Like, obviously, we've seen the deals that have been made for relievers and how well teams have done. Or at least appear to have done, right? I mean, we won't know for sure for 4 or 5 years. But there seems to be some good value returns. But Chad Green's a little bit different in that there's a big dollar figure attached to him, right? He's $10.5 million next year. And so some of the other guys don't have quite that dollar figure attached to them. And so how does that change the market for Green? You know, as soon as options off the table come off the table, then obviously that puts a bit more leverage into the Blue Jays' hands there. But I think that's a factor that differentiates him from a couple of the other relievers that have moved. Now, the bigger question in terms of how deep they go is what you raised earlier. How does this team have a pathway to competing in 2025? And I think the big question right now is, right now they're managing against circumstance, which is what they have to do, right? The season has gone completely off the rails, and you've got to try to make sure that it's not a total loss. But what is the strategic goal right now? Like, is there a real opportunity in 25? Does it need to be a wider reset because there's just not a critical mass of talent? Are there realistic possibilities in the offseason market that can lead to a team that produces a better outcome on the field than this one? Those are the real questions that are unanswered right now. And I'm not sure right now the Blue Jays are managing towards that yet. Right now, they're just managing against circumstance. But at some point, you're going to have to start managing towards a bigger picture or a more direct goal. And that is that to me is really unclear, because I do see I'm not sure how you're getting to a competitive point. I'm not sure how you're getting to that critical mass of talent. Like, there's one near-term player that they've acquired so far, and they should acquire one or two more for Yusei Kikuchi. But is that going to be a realistic base that you've got to rebuild a bullpen? You mentioned catcher. You've got to augment the lineup. You need to bolster the rotation. I mean, can you do all that in one season in a meaningful enough way that you're catching so many teams ahead of you? It's a tough situation.
Yeah, this is what I've been talking about for quite some time, and yet it has seemed as though like there has been, I would say probably 2 months of this front office kind of putting it out there that they were only dealing the rentals, that they didn't want to go into the core guys. Our Ben Nicholson-Smith reported, I think just last week, that they weren't going to move off of Gossman, they weren't going to move off Barrios, they weren't going to move off of Bassett, and obviously the other main two guys. But yeah, I think that's been always my major issue with it, is the two sides of their mouth. We want to compete in 2025. We want to be competitive, but we also need to restock the farm. So to me, there's too many holes. I get it. But do you feel as though, like, talking to you right now, you're much closer with knowing where this front office is at. Do you think that they've been more malleable as of late? Like, there actually has been a stronger understanding of where they're at, where the division's at, how many holes, and the realistic possibility of competing in 2025? Like, maybe they do get a little bit more aggressive over the next couple of days.
Well, I'll put it this way. There's no delusions about where they're at, right? I mean, reality is kick them in the face this year. Like there's no pretending that this is all like sunshine and lollipops. Like they understand, and they're behaving in a way that demonstrates that they understand that. The thing is, they're in that murky gray where there's still enough talent that you're like, okay, if all these things break right, we make the right moves, could we still do this? And so right now, this is one juncture that the Blue Jays are at. Mm-hmm. Their path forward is very, very clear and defined, right? You're selling, and like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. isn't going to move, and I don't think it's likely any of the starters move. But if there's an offer that comes around that twists their arm, that's on the realm of possibility. But I don't think it's something that they're aggressively. They haven't changed that posture or put that forward to clubs. Like, hey, like, yeah, come tell us what you're going to do for Chris Bassett. But if someone comes and says, okay, here, this is what we'll give you for Bassett, they'll listen.
Yeah.
The next juncture is the off season, right? So at that point, you assess. You've gotten all these assets at the deadline. You'll have an idea of what you could potentially do in the off season, or at least start having a vision. And then you're going to start thinking, okay, what is the most likely path forward, or what is the most advantageous path forward? And then there's a third juncture that's coming up, and that's next year's trade deadline. And that could be, mid-season deciding you're in or you're out, and then you can embark on a wider reset or a deeper push, depending on how that plays out. That's my sense of how the front office is right now looking at the situation.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Vladdy. I'm guessing that a lot of his name coming up is, of course, teams are going to inquire. He's red hot right now. I think, his last 30 days, he's top 3 in OPS, top 3 in home runs. Like he's just been average. He's been incredible. How much of that do you think the Blue Jays would seriously entertain? I know you said it's very unlikely, but do you think there actually is a trade package out there that would get them to move him?
I'm sure there's a trade package out there that could move him, or get them to move him. But I don't think there's necessarily a team out there that's going to offer that, right? Mm-hmm. Like everybody's got their price. Like I don't want to sell my house, but if someone came to me and said, "Here's $5 million for it," I'm like, "All right, congratulations." So that's, I think that's the reality. So. If you trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you're making the definitive choice on which way you're going. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the Blue Jays want to make that choice just yet. And so I think that my guess is that if you're keeping Vladimir Guerrero Jr. right now, you're going to try to take a shot at extending him in the off season. And if you get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extended, well, now you're actually building something. And when you go to talk to free agents, you can say, look, this is what we're building around Vlad. He's going to be here long term. We've got these young pieces coming. Our farm system, which was, bottom third, is probably now going to be middle of the pack and trending upwards. And suddenly you've got a different picture that you're selling the teams. I can at least see why as a team you'd want to keep that possibility open. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr., it's like, all right, it's full teardown time, and I don't think the Blue Jays are ready to go there right now. Now, again, everybody's got a price, right? Wayne Gretzky got traded. Anybody can get traded. Sure. But I don't think that's something that the Blue Jays are spending a lot of time on right now, or that other teams are spending a lot of time on trying to convince them.
So is there any part of this when it comes to the Blue Jays not being ready for the teardown or the rebuild? Is there any part of it in your eyes that is through the lens of, well, this front office is not allowed to have another rebuild because what does that say about what they've built and what they've been doing here the last 8 years?
Maybe. I mean, that's possible. And like you just look at the contractual situations, right? Yeah. Like Mark Shapiro's contract is up at the end of 2025. There's Ross Atkins, who's up at the end of 2026. And if you're going down that road, who's leading you down it? And that's not a now decision, right? Yeah. I know people want that to be now decision, but the now decision is the deadline. Yeah. Right. The next decisions after that are like, okay, what are we doing? And what do we have now? with some of that will play out on the field in August and September. And then it's like, where are we going? And then as part of the where are we going, it's, are you the people to lead us there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what makes this such a weird deadline, though, right? Is you keep looking at it and thinking, well, maybe the best thing for the franchise is some of those major moves. Like if you do end up trading Vladimir Guerrero Jr., it's hard for me to believe that you're going to get more for him during the offseason than you could get right now. If you are going to trade Kevin Gossman, it's hard for me to believe that you're going to get more in the offseason than you would right now, things like that. And so whenever you do have those things weighing it, it's hard not to just attribute them to what is happening right now, this moment in time. Okay, so moving with this market, Kikuchi is going to get dealt. But how much of this is waiting on teams, like the other teams, and who's going to decide to sell?
I'm not sure it's so much who's going to decide to sell, but I guess a little bit, right? But I wonder if some of the pitchers with some control, the Garrett Crochet, Tarek Skubal, Eric Fetties, is that the domino that maybe you wait to fall, and then because teams would rather get the guys with 1+?
Yeah, of course.
And then once those guys move, then it's like, okay, now we're on to the rental bodies. And so, I'd been talking to some people, and some people felt that there was a chance that the Kikuchi deal was going to get done over the weekend. It makes sense to agree. His next turn is Wednesday. You don't want to deal him on Tuesday because that costs the team the opportunity to get him in the rotation faster. You obviously want to have him come and acclimate to your new club, get to know your new catcher, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if maybe today is the day to create the runway for that. But, for the Blue Jays, they have to time that market just right. And so the more teams that you can pull into play, and the more teams who maybe don't get what they want elsewhere, and that suddenly bolsters or adds a couple players to your market for Kikuchi, you're going to want to do that, because this is assuming that they're going to go on the rental only plan. This is their last major chance for an impact ad at this deadline. Yeah. So, again, Green could potentially be that. Maybe Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, a team jumps in on him, and you should be able to do okay for him as well. But Kikuchi's the last piece that you can get the leverage. So you're going to try to pull in as many teams as possible, and have them, have a team that's saying, if we don't get, Fetty or Crochet or Skubal, then we're circling back to you for Yusei.
So is your gut feeling that it's going to be a little bit of a disappointing return for him, though?
I don't think it's going to be a disappointing return. Okay. I think they're going to do okay. I mean, you just look at what the market is offering in terms of starting pitchers. And look, he hasn't had a great last 8 starts. The numbers certainly aren't pretty there, but there's a lot of runs that have been tacked on that from base runners left on that the bullpen didn't get him out of, and things like that maybe skew the numbers a little bit. But in terms of stuff, you're not going to find a lot of rental starters with his pure stuff. Like that's start a playoff game stuff. Yeah. And there's not a lot of that out there.
I guess that's where, I don't think Skubal's going to get traded. It feels like the Vladdy thing, where it's teams are calling and teams are trying to make something happen, but you have to get such a huge trade return for that to transpire that, maybe it doesn't happen over the course of the deadline. But I look at it's like Crochet. Now Blake Snell is pitching extremely well. So that's 2 left-handed pitchers that I'd probably put ahead of him. I don't know what your feelings are on Tyler Anderson, but it's like there's another. And then, you've got sort of I guess maybe the number 4 lefty. There's Jack Flaherty still out there. Who else? I think that might be the list of guys that I wrote down. But there's a bunch of guys in front of him, and I just wonder how many are looking at Kikuchi as their guy. Does he have the stuff? Absolutely. I think a lot of teams are looking at it and saying, we want you to be the number 3 pitcher for us in the playoffs. I've just been less convinced of that part specifically. Anyway, let's keep it moving. Justin Turner. Oh, sorry, you want to weigh in on that?
That's the one piece I'll throw in on that.
Yeah.
Is that you also have to remember that not everybody can accommodate every one of those players.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
There's only a couple teams that have the asset base to go get Scribble or Crochet, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody can take on the potential that Blake Snell doesn't opt out, and you're on the hook for $30 million next year. So you have to remember that as much as it's a function of, sure, some guys, you might prefer certain guys, but not everybody has enough chips at the table to get at every guys. And so Yusei Kikuchi, almost every contending team can handle him. And that creates a market and deepens a market.
It's a great point. And again, it goes to my dumb guy brain that you've reminded me twice already. One with the Chad Green point where you're like, not everyone wants to pay Chad Green $10.5 million next year. That's not an attractive. My dumb brain always goes to, there's term, you're under control. Then why wouldn't a team want more of you if they like you now? It's like, because that's not how it works. Dumb idiot. So I'm like, all right. And then same thing with the Kikuchi stuff is you're right. Not everybody wants to handle all those other guys. And there's another year of Blake Snell and health and regression. Some of this year, 3 starts maybe doesn't convince everyone of just automatically dropping $30 million on him next year. Let's keep it moving. Trey Yesavage hasn't signed. This isn't a deadline thing, but what's your understanding of that? Because doesn't it have to get done in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I think that's trending towards getting done. The Blue Jays have gotten pretty much everyone done in their bonus pool and a couple other guys, and they're just figuring out the final numbers. They're seeing where it lands. From what I've been told, that's on track to get done. The Blue Jays had the 19th pick in the 19th round, Demarion Terrell, really interesting guy, but he was going to be like an over slot sign. I don't think they're going to have the room in their bonus pool to get that done. Because I think Yesavage is going to get. I think that's coming. I'm not sure exactly when, but that's coming.
Okay, so fears can dissipate about a guy that I asked Jeff Ponce the other day, is he the number one prospect already within the organization? You see what, Ricky Tiedemann's heading to Tommy John surgery. You saw obviously what happened with the Relvis Martinez this year and where the farm system's at. It's like, I asked him if there was a case that he's already the number one prospect, and he's like, yeah, maybe. So to have him not signed would be pretty devastating.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a hugely important draft for the Blue Jays for a number of different reasons, right? Mm-hmm. But if this draft doesn't pan out, then this team's in trouble in an even deeper hole than it is right now. That critical mass is just so much further away. Yeah.
I forgot to ask about these guys. Does Justin Turner have a market? I know Kiermaier left the game hurt yesterday. Did they move him and eat some money? Like, what is your thought on the older position players?
I think that we'll see how serious the Kiermaier injury is, and that would be a shame for him. But also, that's the way he plays and the way he's sacrificing his body. It's been incredible to watch. But I think both those guys are probably late Tuesday kind of ads where the Blue Jays are eating a good amount of money. Like, to me, Turner makes a lot of sense for a contending club that is looking for like a team like the Rangers, right, where you're sort of in contention, but you're not sure that how deep you want to go on it. Like, they could definitely use a bat like everybody. I looked at them at what they were doing this weekend. They were like, Justin Turner would really work in that lineup, and or someone who just wants who needs someone to hit some left-handed pitching or come off the bench. I can see Justin Turner making sense for someone, but I can also see teams maybe looking at different options first and then circling back to that once it gets late to the deadline. And similar with Kiermaier, a team might be saying, I wonder if the Jays are going to release him. If they're going to want to get Jonathan Clase up, they're going to want him to get playing. We can just get him for the minimum after the deadline. So maybe no team feels like they need to jump there. So I think that's how it'll play out probably late Tuesday if if those deals happen.
Yeah, I think if you're a playoff team, who wouldn't really want to have Justin Turner as an option coming off of your bench in a playoff game? But yeah, even the prorated $13 million seems like a bit of a steep price. Last thing on the deadline, I'll let you go. You've been generous with the time. Do you have any sense in terms of, like, they get the Class A kid, and he slots in right away as their 7th rated prospect in the system by, I think, MLB Pipeline, and maybe that's even a little low, again, considering some of the injuries and suspensions for the Blue Jays right now and kind of how those things end up shaking up. But is your sense that when they're selling right now and when they're making these deals, that there are sort of stipulations on these prospects, like that they're not looking for what is potentially the best available, or they're not looking for higher upside guys, even though this dude is a project, right? That is how he's described, as he's got a wild approach, and even though he started in the big leagues this year, got his opportunity in the big leagues this year, that there's a lot of work to do there. But do you think that they are looking at this deadline through the eye of, we need guys who are closer to the big leagues rather than lottery tickets? Like, is there a philosophy here?
I'm not sure you always have that choice.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think what you do is you gather up all the different possibilities for you, and you try to assess what's the best set of possibilities for us, right? And so, look, with all these players, the likelihood is far higher that they don't make it than they do.
Yeah.
And so you're just looking for what are the probabilities and what are the opportunities for value. And so, as they're going through, say, the Jimmy Garcia deal, and Jonathan Clase was on the table, they're like, okay, they didn't need to play that out any further. They're like,
we want
this
it
is good. Yeah, this is. With some of the other guys, like if that same circumstance existed around Yusei Kikuchi, like the preferred guy that they want, they would go get him. And I think ultimately you're just making choices based on what's available to you. So if there's a player who's a little bit more near term and it's similar to an A-ball player who's a bit more down the road, look, anyone who's in AAA, you have a far higher probability of making the right call on than someone who's an A-ball. There's just so much can go wrong along the way. So that's a function of what's presented to them as opposed to what is their stated philosophy. But part of that is your assessments. Is this going to be better than that? And so it's not singular in the way that you're describing it. It's a measure of all factors. But the lean would always be to get someone closer when possible, because the probability is going to be higher.
Shi, thanks for the time, buddy. I hope it's busy today.
Yeah, it should. It's going to be fun. It's going to be busy regardless with the doubleheader.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, if that's the busy of the day, then people are going to be pissed. But anyways, thanks, buddy. Talk to you later.
Take care, man. See ya.